Why do you have to kill her just like that? She is my boss. You should have gone for divorce. What happens when a secret affair becomes more important than a marriage? What happens when lies become so tangled that someone decides murder is easier than telling the truth? Every year, relationships end because of betrayal, infidelity, and broken trust. But there is one choice that should never be on the table: taking a human life. If a marriage is no longer working, there are lawful paths forward. Counseling is an option. Separation is an option. Divorce is an option. Walking away is an option. Murder is never an option. Tonight's case is one of deception, forbidden romance, manipulation, and a murder plot that prosecutors say was carefully staged to look like a home invasion. A respected federal agent, a trusted family nanny, a loving wife, and a man who lost his life after being drawn into a deadly scheme. This is the disturbing story of Brendan Banfield, Christine Banfield, Joseph Ryan, and Juliana Peres Magalhães. Stay with us as we uncover one of Virginia's most shocking murder cases. On the surface, Brendan Banfield appeared to have built a successful life. He worked as a special agent for the Internal Revenue Service, a position that carried responsibility and respect. His wife, Christine Banfield, was known as a caring nurse, devoted mother, and beloved family member. Together, they were raising their children in Herndon, Virginia. To outsiders, it looked like the picture of stability. But many criminal investigations reveal the same lesson. Sometimes the image presented to the world is very different from the reality hidden behind closed doors. According to prosecutors, serious cracks had begun to develop within the Banfield household. And at the center of those cracks was a relationship that should never have existed. The family's Brazilian au pair, Juliana Peres Magalhães, had become far more than a nanny. She had become Brendan Banfield's secret lover. What began as an affair would eventually become the foundation of a criminal case that shocked the community and devastated multiple families. Affairs often thrive in secrecy. They depend on hidden messages, secret meetings, and carefully constructed lies. Investigators later alleged that Banfield and Magalhães were deeply involved in a romantic relationship while he was still married. For Christine, the betrayal wasn't simply emotional. The person entrusted to help care for her children had allegedly become involved with her husband. The situation was explosive. Family trust had been shattered. But according to prosecutors, the affair alone wasn't the end of the story. Authorities would later argue that the relationship evolved into something much darker. Instead of ending the marriage honestly, investigators claimed a plan was set in motion. A plan that would forever change several lives. February 24th, 2023. The quiet suburban neighborhood of Herndon, Virginia, was about to become the center of a major homicide investigation. Inside the Banfield home, events unfolded that would leave 2 people dead. According to authorities, Christine Banfield was attacked and killed. Another man, Joseph Ryan, also lost his life. What exactly happened inside that home would become the subject of intense courtroom battles. At first, the scene appeared confusing. There were claims of an intruder. There were allegations of violence. There were conflicting explanations. But detectives quickly realized that something wasn't adding up. Experienced investigators often rely on a simple principle. Crime scenes tell stories. And this crime scene appeared to be telling a story different from the one being presented. Prosecutors argued that the entire scene had been carefully staged. According to the state's case, Banfield and Magalhães attempted to create the impression that Joseph Ryan was a home invader. The goal, investigators alleged, was to make it appear that Ryan had entered the house and attacked Christine. Afterward, authorities say Magalhães called 911 and reported that Ryan was responsible. To emergency responders, it sounded like a horrific home invasion. But detectives began examining physical evidence, timelines, communications, and witness statements. Piece by piece, the official narrative started to crumble. What initially looked like an attack by an outsider increasingly appeared to prosecutors as something planned from within. And as investigators dug deeper, the affair between Banfield and Magalhães became impossible to ignore. Major homicide investigations are rarely solved through one dramatic discovery. Instead, they are often built through hundreds of small details: phone records, digital communications, witness interviews, forensic evidence, behavior before and after the crime. As investigators assembled the puzzle, prosecutors became convinced that the murders were connected to the secret affair. Authorities alleged that Banfield wanted to eliminate obstacles standing in the way of his relationship with Magalhães. The prosecution's theory painted a picture of calculation rather than spontaneity. This wasn't described as a crime committed in a sudden moment of rage. Instead, prosecutors argued it was deliberate, planned, methodical, and self-serving. The allegations stunned those who followed the case. A respected former federal agent now stood accused of orchestrating a deadly scheme against his own wife. Who was Christine Banfield? Amid the legal arguments and courtroom drama, one important fact must never be forgotten. A woman lost her life. Friends and family described Christine Banfield as compassionate and caring. She worked as a nurse. She was a mother. She was a sister. She was someone deeply loved. During sentencing, loved ones spoke about the devastating void left behind. The loss wasn't simply measured in court documents. It was measured in birthdays missed, family gatherings forever changed, children growing up without a mother, and relatives forced to relive unimaginable pain. For them, the case wasn't merely about criminal charges. It was about a life that could never be replaced. The courtroom battle. As the trial unfolded, prosecutors presented their evidence against Brendan Banfield. They argued that he had played a central role in a conspiracy that resulted in the deaths of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. The defense challenged those claims. Banfield consistently maintained that he was innocent. Throughout the proceedings, he denied responsibility for his wife's death. The courtroom became a battleground between competing narratives. On one side stood prosecutors arguing that the murders were intentional and carefully orchestrated. On the other stood a defendant insisting he was wrongly accused. Jurors listened to testimony, reviewed evidence, and weighed the facts presented before them. Eventually, they reached their conclusion. Brendan Banfield was found guilty of aggravated murder and related firearm offenses. The verdict marked a dramatic turning point in the case. But the story was far from over. Juliana Magalhães is the nanny, an harlot in the house. Attention also focused on Juliana Peres Magalhães. The former au pair found herself at the center of one of Virginia's most notorious criminal cases. According to court proceedings, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter charges connected to the plot. Her involvement became a critical component of the prosecution's case. Many observers were stunned. Someone brought into a family home to help care for children had become entangled in a deadly affair and murder investigation. The consequences would be severe. Although prosecutors reportedly recommended a lighter sentence, the judge ultimately imposed a much harsher punishment. Magalhães was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The decision reflected the court's view of the seriousness of her actions. He also expressed disappointment in the legal system and suggested investigators had not fully explored other possibilities. His remarks stood in stark contrast to the prosecution's theory and the jury's verdict. Even after conviction, he remained defiant. For many observers, it was one of the most striking moments of the entire case. A convicted man facing life imprisonment still insisting he had been wrongly judged. Lessons from a deadly affair. Cases like this leave behind difficult questions. How does a secret relationship evolve into a criminal conspiracy? How do lies become so destructive? And how many warning signs were missed along the way? One lesson stands above all others. Infidelity creates pain. Betrayal creates pain. Divorce creates pain. But murder creates permanent devastation. A marriage can end. A relationship can end. Trust can be broken and rebuilt elsewhere, but a life taken can never be returned. The consequences ripple through generations. Children lose parents. Families lose loved ones. Entire communities are left searching for answers. The Brendan Banfield case stands as a chilling reminder of what can happen when deception, selfishness, and the desire for control override basic human decency. A wife lost her life. Another man lost his life. Children lost their mother. Families were shattered forever. And the man once entrusted with enforcing the law now faces the rest of his life behind prison walls. As always, we remember the victims at the center of this tragedy, Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the sentence was justified? Share your respectful opinions in the comments below. If you enjoy true crime documentaries that explore the facts behind shocking criminal cases, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us for the next investigation. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, no secret is worth a human life.